This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson. Yes, this is your host, Harry Wilkinson, and welcome once again to the Spirit and Wellness Show. My apologies for the delay in our production. We had some unfortunate technical difficulties, but we seem to be back on the air. At least I hope so. Rather ironically, the title of this episode of the Spirit and Wellness Show is The Language of the Unheard. And when I first started the show this morning, because of technical difficulties, you could not hear me. So it really was the language of the unheard. But that's not exactly what I had in mind when I came up with that title for the show. I will explain that. It is a quote from Martin Luther King. And I will talk more about what that means and how it relates to the Spirit and Wellness Show. But on today's show, besides talking about that, we're going to talk about some environmental issues, good and bad. As we do with the show, we don't really judge good or bad, but we will look at different sides of the coin and things that are happening, that are changing, how we are dealing with climate change and that sort of thing. And we'll talk, as we often have, about living in the mystery, the not knowing. Times like these, we often find ourselves there anyway, and it's about our comfort level in doing so. You know, I've spoken at length about some of the public incidents that bring us to that point, and I think they are wonderful opportunities to develop that spiritual practice. So we'll talk about that. But first, we're going to talk about something I mentioned on the show last week. I've talked for quite a few years on the show, as a matter of fact, about this period of change that I have spoken about with astrologers and likened to or connected to an astrological set of alignments between the planet of Uranus and the planet of Pluto, which, even though scientists have demoted it to from being a planet, astrologers still consider it to be so. And as I always preface this, I know that there are some people who don't particularly believe in astrology. This is not any kind of promotion of that at all. I just find it to be helpful and illustrative of things that are going on. So this period, which started in 2012, really, and coincides with these alignments, which really just ended in March. I've been talking about how this period of time is a time of social change and upheaval. That's what those two planets symbolize. Uranus being the planet of innovation and revolution and new energy, new spirit, as well as the spirit of connectedness and freedom. And Pluto is a planet of control, of, in many cases, dark energy. Extremism falls under Pluto. Pluto gets very obsessive and extreme. All of those fall under the planet Pluto in astrological symbolism. So we have had this clash between the desire for independence and new ways of thinking and new ways of living and new ways of being, opposed by control issues, power issues, darkness, extremism. And we've seen this playing out in many, many, many instances across the board during that time period. We saw the Arab Spring begin and then falter and still struggle to begin to sprout again, which is pretty much where this has been. It's always been, that whole period of time was to be a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of time, because of that clash of influences. It was a time when you had dictators and powerful autonomous rulers overthrown, and we've seen things like I think I mentioned Charlie Hebdo, that incident that happened in Paris not too long ago, where extremists killed the illustrators in that magazine for incendiary remarks and so forth and so on. So this is the kind of thing that has been going on, and I mentioned that those aspects, now that they are done, have served to bring to our awareness those things that need our attention in those areas. In other words, we now begin from those ashes, if you will. We now begin to see the problems, or see the weaknesses, see the things we want to change, see the things that need improvement. And things have revealed themselves that now will change our focus in many, many ways. The most recent of these, by the way, before I get to what I was talking about last week, the most recent of these, I just came across this morning in an article in the Washington Post about Jimmy Carter's visit to the Middle East, and how he was unable, and really he didn't even try, to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders due to the fact that they don't return his phone calls, and they don't return his phone calls because they feel that he is anti-Israel, because he pretty much criticizes their policies towards the Palestinians and towards the building of settlements and so forth and so on. So, difference in opinions aren't tolerated in that government, apparently. So, but what he had to say, and what has revealed itself, again, out of the wake of these astrological influences, and out of the wake of this man Netanyahu's re-election, it's been revealed that while he has been saying that he would like to see what they call the 2-state solution between Israel and Palestine, where they live, they coexist peacefully and autonomously. While he has, continued the lip service of that, towards the end of his election, he said he would not ever tolerate a 2-state solution. And then once he was elected, he tried to walk that back and say, well, I didn't quite mean it that way. But what Jimmy Carter has really confirmed, and President Obama has also come to this realization himself. But what he's confirmed is that Mr. Netanyahu, and this is Jimmy Carter's words, has not and never will be in favor of a 2-state solution. So all of this time, where people have been trying to create, a peace there in that Middle East, here's a guy who is clearly going to undermine any efforts to do so, and in an underhanded way. Well, he's not able to hide in the shadows anymore. We know what his inclination is, and we know that as long as there is as long as he's prime minister, there's not going to be any effort made for a 2-state solution on their part. So that with that knowledge, however, that allows us then to go forward in the United States and begin to really understand what's been happening in that region and to take appropriate steps. And that's really where the ending of this astrological alignment brings us to the place of new awareness, the place where we then begin to, now knowing, can make forward steps. So I mentioned last week, last Sunday, about the incident in Baltimore with the young man who died in police custody with a broken neck. And I said this is going to be one of those big events that galvanizes people. And this was last Sunday, and it was before everything really blew up with the riots and the incredible destruction that took place in Baltimore on Monday. I mentioned that the Freddie Gray killing was going to be one of those things that has come out of this conflict, this social unrest period of time, where we now really realize, we really see what is going on and what changes need to be made. And I said that this would be a great example of it, and I had no idea that, at least not consciously, that this was going to happen, but it did. And it has galvanized the world. Unfortunately, it took riots to really put this into perspective. But basically, Mr. Gray, 25-year-old man, was arrested by police. Apparently, they thought he had a switchblade. What turned out, he had a legal gun. So he was arrested illegally, basically. There was no reason to arrest this man. He had been arrested before, apparently, frequently. That's why the police were so willing to, just arrest him again. And he had been arrested before for drug possession, basically. But in any case, it's been determined that the police officers involved, who have now been, by the way, are now being have criminal charges of murder against them, had been responsible for putting him in the back of a van, not securing him, and possibly the injury that he had to his spinal cord in his neck may have even happened before he got into the police van. But it certainly happened, there certainly was injury beforehand, and he had continued to ask for medical assistance and was denied medical assistance, so on and so forth. But in any case, and I'm sure that you've heard it on the news. It's been nonstop. But when these things focus our attention like a laser on issues that we think are important, we begin to realize what is truth for many people, what is the existence for many people. Incidents like these help to lift awareness for everyone. That brings me to the title that I was talking about at the beginning of the show here, which is The Language of the Unheard. And as I mentioned, it comes from a quote from Martin Luther King, where he said, violence is the language of the unheard. Well, he's been quoted as that. Actually, the actual quote, I believe, is a riot is the language of the unheard. I think that is the actual quote, but the meaning is very, very close. And what he meant to say which he said in 1967. This was not too far, not too much earlier before he would, finally be assassinated. But what he was saying, and obviously he's the advocate for nonviolence. But what he was trying to do was to give people a perspective to understand, what this is, why this is. Not to demonize it or to demonize those people, but to get people to understand that riots occur. A riot is the language of the unheard. People who are unseen and unheard and don't feel like their voice can get through become so frustrated that the only way that they can get people's attention is through an act of vandalism or violence. That's what he was talking about. And in relation to Baltimore, what that means is Baltimore is, again, another, and as I said, this is a perfect symbol coming out of the social unrest period that I've been talking about that really illustrates everything. Baltimore is a city that really shows the disparity in economic disparity in income. You have a wealthy part of Baltimore, which is around the inner harbor of Baltimore, where there's lots of development going on, there's lots of money going on, and then you have large swaths of very, very poor neighborhoods where there's a lot of unemployment, where there's gang activity, where there's violence, and the problem is that Freddie Gray, by the way, came from one of those neighborhoods. The problem is in cities across the country that these people, the poorest of us, aren't getting their needs met, aren't getting heard, aren't able to find any relief, to feel like they're going forward, making some kind of progress. And in that kind of despair, the world that you live in, the neighborhood you live in, as much as you may care about it and care about the people, when it starts to be or feel like a prison, well, many people would try to break out. So, when a lot of people ask these questions, and again, this is not to encourage it. This is not to excuse it or even condone it. That's not what Martin Luther King was trying to do. That's not what I'm trying to do. It's just a way to hopefully help people understand. I heard a lot of people say, well, what kind of animals burn down their own neighborhood and their own stores? I mean, well, it's what kind of people do that? Well, people who feel imprisoned, as I mentioned, by the very environment in which they live would want to burn it down if it's a place that confines them. That's why. That's why. The language of the unheard. So now on to, as we do on this show, on to looking at this from an even more spiritual perspective. I think I've just been doing so, but we go to the highest level that we can here. So whenever you have incidences like these, and I've mentioned this time and time again, because sadly we have so many incidences where the world is connected, paying attention to these things, whether they be these terrible acts of shootings in schools, whether it be unexplained planes disappearing and no one knowing where they are, like the Malaysian plane. I particularly mentioned it in regards to this. These are opportunities to really live in the mystery, to live in the not knowing. So many people, I mean, the first thing they do, and this was really typical of what happened with that missing plane. You had all of these experts coming in, you know, pontificating upon what must have happened. This had to have happened, and none of it turned out to have happened because nobody really knows what happened. But we, as so-called experts, or particularly our empiricist mindset, that we can't seem to feel comfortable in not knowing, and in the understanding that there are many, many, many things that we will never know in the empiricist way of knowing. Okay? And that's what a lot of these major incidents help us to do. Freddie Gray, that whole incident, and the riots that ensued, that's another opportunity to understand, or to get into the not knowing. And it's not it isn't the not knowing what happened, although that is there too, and that was there for quite a while. But it's the not knowing of why. Why would police do this to someone? And then you have those that come on and say, well, it's obviously racism, or it's obviously, he was anti-cop, so they, went overboard. Everybody has their idea, but you don't know. And I just, a few minutes ago talked about riots and why they occur, but the impetus behind them, why we have such wide economic disparity, we don't know. We don't know. And if behavior baffles us, the first thing we do is we try to explain it, or we try to find some expert who can explain it for us. And in a spiritual practice, to look at it from a spiritual perspective, that is actually not what you would do at all. Because spirituality involves, a deep respect for mysteries of life, the distinctiveness of other souls, other people, the beauty of nature and the animal world. As much as sciences explain things, they skim the surface. You may know how plants grow, you may know how animals develop in the world, but can you explain why? The deep complexities of our inner selves, the depths and the connection, when we seek to explain or believe that we know everything, we disconnect from an awareness of that. And so things like this, and not so much of Freddie Gray, though that it's part of it, but things like these big incidents reawaken that in us, remind us of how much we really don't know. So wisdom traditions, spiritual traditions, challenge us to live within this unknowing. So the first step is, when you come across something that's baffling, hidden, inscrutable, is to cherish that. Live with paradoxes. Give up the idea that you can always get it, because you can't. All the different ologies, psychology, sociology. All right, I'll even say astrology, though that is one of the ologies I tend to look at sometimes. Theology. All of those things try to explain everything. And they don't. Although I will say, in defense of astrology, astrology really doesn't try to explain everything. The best astrologers actually enhance your awareness of the mystery, not to explain uh, anything other than, you know, this might be a cycle that you're going through, and but the mystery of how that happens, the mystery of the planets aligning, and all of those things are still very much a part of astrology. Anyway, I don't I don't want to get into defending astrology right now. I want to continue with this. Um, Whenever you are honestly stumped, and this is a good point here. Whenever you're honestly stumped by the existence of evil, injustice, or suffering, like we see with the Freddie Gray incident and many other incidents, resist the temptation to ask why. And never be afraid to admit, I don't know. Because you know what? You don't. No matter how much you think you know, you don't. So this practice might be something that's helpful in cultivating our comfort in living in the mystery, because we have to do it anyway. And we can either delude ourselves that we have the answers that we don't have, or we can accept mystery. And that's hard for a lot of people to do, because it's sort of an affront to the modern mindset that says we have to have answers to every question, and we need to create these little compartments to put everything in. And then there are others, who ignore mysteries, and these are people who are trained scientists that you would think embrace mystery, but they'll ignore mysteries like, the mystery of psi ability, and they'll poo-poo it, and they'll, create roadblocks to any further investigation of it, because it lies outside their ideas of reason and logic. So if sometimes you think that answers are wisdom, try practicing mystery. All right, we've got a few minutes left to our show here, and I want to get to some of these incidences that are going on in the environment. So, first thing is the climate change that we are experiencing now seems to be risking our species in a very, very visceral way. It's estimated that 1 in 6 species on the planet could face extinction due to climate change. The prediction is that temperatures may rise by 4 degrees if carbon emissions continue on their current path, and even if they're reduced, we seem to be well on our way to that kind of a temperature rise. But if it happens, 16% of animals and plants will be lost. We're already losing a wide variety of species. So this is data from a meta-analysis of 131 scientific studies that show that the rate of biodiversity loss is likely to speed up with each degree of rise in temperature. If future temperatures rise by 2 degrees, for example, global extinction risk will rise from, 2.8% today to 5.2%. But if it goes up to 4%, which is where we're headed now, 16% of these species. Higher extinction rates are predicted for Australia, New Zealand, and South America, where many species adapted to live in habitats not found anywhere else can't live because their habitat isn't there anymore. according to this professor from the University of Arizona in South America, the extinction risk was estimated to be 23%. Unfortunately, this higher number might better reflect the number of species that might go extinct due to climate change globally, if we consider how the world's species are disturbed. So it's another plea for us to, get on the ball with climate change, which we seem to be on our way to doing, but that's not all. Um, there's a wildlife decline going on that may lead to an empty landscape. The populations of some of the world's largest wild animals, animals like zebras and lions and so forth, they are dwindling, and that raises the threat of an empty landscape because of what they do for the landscape. 60% of giant herbivores, plant eaters, and that includes elephants and rhinos and gorillas, are at risk of extinction. 60%. And this is blamed on poaching and habitat loss, and of course the habitat loss comes from not only climate change, but our own purposeful destruction of the habitat for energy purposes. This comes from Oregon State University, and the research looked at all of these herbivores weighing over 100 pounds, from the reindeer up to the African elephant. And apparently this is the first time anyone has looked at these species as a whole, and they're seeing that the declining of these animals is causing empty landscape in the forests, savanna, grasslands, and deserts. Big carnivores like the charismatic big cats or wolves face horrendous problems from direct persecution, overhunting, and habitat loss. But the new study adds another nail to their coffin, the empty larder. It's no use having habitat if there's nothing left to eat in it. So this decline is being driven by habitat loss, hunting for meat or body parts, and competition for food and resources with livestock. People are hunting rhinoceroses for their horns so that they can make a lot of money. Same with elephant tusks, and that in it of itself is damaging. But besides that, there's so many other just natural things. And once the large herbivores go away, what happens? Well, you have a loss of habitat. Elephants, for instance, maintain forest clearings by trampling vegetation. So without them there, that habitat goes away. It'll have an effect on the food chain because lions, leopards, hyenas, they rely on herbivores for food. Seed dispersal. The large herbivores eat seeds, and which are carried over long distances. And the impact on us, of course, is that it says, according to this article, 1 billion people rely on wild meat for subsistence, and the loss of these herbivores will have a negative impact on tourism as well. People like to go and see the elephants and so forth and so on. So all of these things are happening, but however, here's the good news. In Vancouver, they've recently made the announcement at the 2015 ICLEI World Conference on Energy in Seoul, South Korea. Vancouver has pledged to run on 100% renewable energy. 100% renewable energy. Making it the greenest city among cities with a population of at least 100,000 people. And Vancouver is trying to lead the way. They already have a green economy, highly diversified, homegrown green economy. They have a nice green climate. Greenhouse gas emissions are on the decline there. They cut greenhouse gas emissions by 33%. Or their goal is to cut it by 33% by 2020. They have green and sustainable buildings, green transportation, reduced waste. You know what? We're going to talk more about this really interesting stuff Vancouver is doing, because we really want to go into it in somewhat of depth. I think it's phenomenal and fantastic, and we've gone way over my allotted time here, so I have to wrap up the show. So until next week, then, where we'll explore more of Vancouver and its tremendous work